I wasn't spending enough time with my family. I wasn't home enough. I was too concerned with making ends meet, so to speak, being the best neighbor on the block kind of thing, making all that money. And that's just not the important part of a marriage or a family.
Hello, and welcome to the Stay Free Forever podcast, episode 13. My name is Clifford Fuel, host of the podcast that aims to help you adapt and thrive. The podcast has been on a 3-month break, and I'm happy to return with a guest who is just the sort of person we like to talk to. Just because a person had a great childhood with his younger siblings in small-town America and was raised by stable, loving parents, success by traditional measures is no guarantee. Success of a very different nature, ultimately, could come even 60 years later, as appears to be the case for my guest today. Armand Louis Mullendore, who goes by Corkey, has spent over 27 of his 68 years in one form of incarceration or another. His most recent stint was a 12-year stretch in federal prison in Lompoc, California, for conspiracy to possess and distribute methamphetamine. Since then, Corkey has had 2 chances to finish up his sentence on the outside, and each time he has violated the terms of his probation by drinking. Corkey was born in 1955 in Gray Bull, Wyoming, the son of a seismologist father and a homemaker mother, who raised Corkey along with his younger brother and sister. At 14 years old, Corkey got a job as a cook at Calico Pizza in Wilson, Wyoming, near Jackson, and has enjoyed working in the food service industry, plus a few others, ever since. I met Corkey earlier this year when he joined my cognitive awareness Zoom class that was assigned to him by his probation officer. Although Corkey looks the part of the seasoned lifer right out of central casting, lean, weathered features, white hair, white mustache, he is in person cheerful, good-natured, articulate, and polite. And for what it's worth, which is a lot, Corkey is one of the very few of my federal probation Zoom class students who was early to every class and who completed his 65-page workbook weeks ahead of its due date. Welcome to the Stay Free Forever podcast, Corkey Mullendore.
Hello, Cliff. Glad to be here.
Well, thanks for making the time to do it. How'd you come to be called Corkey, Armand?
It's my granddad's name. He gave me that name. I was born premature, and he said when he seen me in the incubator, all he could see was my nose and my pecker sticking up, and he said, "Isn't that a corker?" That's the story I was told, Cliff.
And so it's been Corkey ever since.
Armand is my real name, and when somebody calls me that, I know it's some kind of official entity, so I really try to avoid that. I had nicknames here and there. One guy called me Willie, like Willie Nelson, and most of them just called me Cook.
One of the things you wrote in your workbook at the end, it said, how are you going to not go back to prison again? And what you wrote was very simple. Remember my roots. I'm not a bad person. Talk about your roots a little bit.
I grew up in what you would call the old days, where it was all about family, hard work. The guy took care of things, and mom stayed at home, and those sorts of things. And it was a much simpler life. Wasn't so fast-paced. You did most everything yourself, and it was a lot more comfortable than nowadays, for me anyway. Along the way, though, my dad told me that I've lived in every state this side of the Mississippi River.
Where do your earliest memories come from?
I think I was in first grade or so in Forsyth, Montana. That's kind of where I remember the most. Cold and miserable. I remember that. It was a 3-story brick building, and it was just always miserable cold. We traveled a lot. My dad pulled a mobile home. He pulled it with an old Jeep wagon. So we lived in the mobile home. But it was enjoyable. Those trips across country, like from Forsyth, Montana, we went to Pecos, Texas, all the way across the country. And as kids rode in the far back of the Jeep, and we sat back there and played, listened to music, on the radio. And, didn't have tape players, none of that. And we pumped our hands so we'd get the 18-wheelers to honk at us, all those sorts of things. It was a lot of fun. We had good time traveling.
How old were you when you hit Wyoming?
I moved there in 1968, I believe. I was in 5th grade. I remember riding my little Stingray bicycle back and forth to Jackson from Wilson. You know, we hitchhiked around, didn't have any trouble with that. Everybody picked you up. Fishing a lot, floated the creek. We had a canoe. We could go up and down the Snake and on Fish Creek and Flat Creek. In the wintertime, we'd ice skate on the creeks and lakes and things. And of course, you know, we'd go out and shoot birds and stuff with the 22, those sorts of things.
Try doing that today.
Yeah. There's just too much humanity up there now. You can't walk out into the woods anymore. There's a house there. Yep, it was really nice back then.
When you were 14, you got a job at Calico Pizza. What was your first responsibility there?
Well, you know, Calico, before it was anything, was an old church that the owners brought up from Moose, and they built a bridge across the creek there and moved the whole church in there and set it up. And my brother and I helped him float the logs in on the creek just to put the bridge in. So we were there right from the beginning. And then when they got it up and running, they gave us an opportunity to cook. And then we go over, we had our own set of keys to the place, and we go over and vacuum it every day. And got to listen to the jukebox for free, that kind of thing. All the Coke we could drink. I did that until I started high school. When I started high school, then I got in a mentor program and started working at, it isn't there now because it burned down, it was the old Cattle Baron restaurant right on the square. There I was the prep cook. I made bread and salad dressings, and I could help with the grill and all that sort of stuff. I worked with some really good people there. The guy that owned it, his name was Ron Hansen. Gosh, I just idolized that guy. He was a great dude. Really good cook, good businessman. He'd take me fishing and hunting and stuff like that.
What makes a good boss, in your opinion?
In my opinion, you have to trust in your people. If they're not doing a good job, it's not their fault. It's because you haven't trained them. It's that simple. Get in there and work with them, show them what's up, and they'll come around. And you can't expect employees to do it the way you do it. They have to do it the way they're comfortable with it. As long as the outcome is the same, that's the point. You know, not everybody's right-handed.
Yeah, good point.
I've trained myself out of a lot of jobs. Be teaching somebody else how to do it, and all of a sudden they wanted to do it. And I said, fine, see you later.
What are some of the major don'ts, in your opinion, of what a boss should not do?
Well, you should never raise your voice, for one thing. That accomplishes nothing. And that goes a long ways. Because everybody's going to have something else to say, and as soon as you speak up, it just escalates. Especially when you're working a hotline, if a waitress makes you mad, or a customer's making them mad, something like that, you just have to put it aside and say, okay, we'll tend to this later. Then when it's all over with, the end of the day, then you go and talk about it. Escalating problems is something I'm just not big on. It'll wait a minute.
Of course it will. You were in a mentoring program in high school. You're working for a nice restaurant on the square in Jackson, Wyoming. What happens then?
When I was 17, the Cattle Baron had burnt down. I was working at Right Now's Bakery down on the south end of town for a guy named Charlie Roth, and I got offered a job with Ron Hansen again. He bought the Pink Garter Palace. So I went up there and started working, and he'd been there, had it open about a year, and I bought a new pickup truck, brand new off the showroom floor, those sorts of things, and had a bunch of guns in my pickup. And the police officer stopped and for some reason decided those guns were stolen, so they arrested me and convicted me as a minor on possession of stolen property. So I went and did my first little stint at the Wyoming Boys Town in Portland. I was there about less than a year because I was 17 and some change, so I just stayed there until I was 18.
So why were you pulled over in the first place?
I wasn't. I was sitting in my truck, and the officer walked up and said, let me see those guns. So, yeah, I had 32 guns in my truck.
And why was that?
My dad had gotten them somewhere. I don't know where he got them. He got them from John Paul Jenick. That's all I knew about it. I I thought they were fun, and I'd been out shooting them and all that stuff, and they were in my pickup.
How did the Worland Boys Town experience affect you?
As soon as I got there, went through their orientation things, I immediately started working in the kitchen under a guy named Shai. He was a cook sergeant for the military. He was an older guy. He was really good, too. They had a meat cutting class there, and they had their own Gary, things like that. So I started doing that. I did part of the meat cutting class, worked the grill, helped with tables, did all those sorts of things.
Wow. Sounds like it wasn't an entirely negative experience at all.
I was away from home and all that. I didn't really know what had happened to me. Kind of went by quick, actually.
Is it fair to say that that was in a time where people didn't really question authority much, and so your parents weren't in a position to say, hey, these were our guns, he was just goofing around, he's not a bad kid, or how did that play out?
To this day, I don't really know how that all came about. I don't know if my dad knew they were stolen or didn't, and I had them and he didn't know. I really don't know the extent of all that, Cliff.
But you took your consequences, took your lumps.
Yeah, I was a minor, so I don't know. It was almost an adventure in a way. But, I just really had no clue.
Sure. So you get out, you're 18. What's your first move?
Well, I immediately went to work to Ron Hansen. He had a chef's job at a place in California called the Red Lion Inn in San Mateo. So I went up there and gave me a sous chef's job. So it had 7 kitchens in it. So I was working one of those kitchens.
So you got a good job as a sous chef out in California. It's very different from Wyoming. And then what happens?
Well, the union came in and started unionizing the house. So we either had to join the union or leave the operation. So working for unions in the culinary business is really a hassle because you can't do anything that isn't part of your job description. I couldn't clean anything. I couldn't help anybody else. It was really no fun. And Ron Hansen, my buddy, he went to a place called Los Banos. And he took a chef's job at a place called Carlos Villa. So he invited me to go down to Los Banos. So I went down there and took the sous chef's job with him. About 2 years later after that, I came back to Wyoming because my mom passed away. And when I flew back into San Francisco, I met up with Ron Hansen's nephew, met one of the waitresses at his place, which was Marie Callender's, met her and spent the night there and married in that one.
Wow. Found love in the restaurant business.
I did.
All right, then. Did you make your home out in Northern California?
Yeah, we made our home there in Los Banos, and I was there for about 14 years. Had 3 children, bought our own house, all those things. It was a good part of my life.
Then what happened?
Well, then I took the manager's job at a place that a guy opened up that was starting a barbecue and pizza house. He told my wife that he didn't want her coming to the restaurant to bother me. She just didn't want her there at all. She said, well, you're either going to have to quit that job or me, one of the two. Well, I couldn't just duck out of it. I couldn't just leave it hanging because I was the manager. There was no other cooks. For some reason, me working all the time, and I'm not sure how that all happened. Anyway, she filed for divorce. Like I said, I was of the old school where I thought my job was just to work all I could and bring home the bacon and mow the lawn, That just doesn't do it. That doesn't take care of a family at all. That divorce was really traumatizing. It just took everything out of me. So I pretty much waited right off the far side cliff, started doing drugs and drinking and lost a job or two. And I was 40 then, 40 something. I don't remember exactly. Living on the streets and had no job, no money. I was skinny as a rail. I was in bad shape. So I called my dad. He was down in Forsyth, Arizona. And I said, Dad, I need a break here. So he sent me a bus ticket to Quartzsite. I got on the bus with a brown paper bag with everything I owned in it, and off I went. Sure was nice to see my dad. He saved me.
How did Quartzsite treat you?
Portside was another good deal. I went to work in a place called Bill Truck Stop. He had 3 restaurants, 3 truck stops in Arizona. I wound up staying there about 5 years. Wound up being the general manager over all 3 operations. My cooks kept coming to me and saying there's no help. We don't have enough people. I said, where is everybody? They all called in sick. He said, well, they don't have any drugs. So what are you talking about? And that was the first time I crossed methamphetamine. So I said, well, let's fix that. And I just went and bought a big sack of it for them, and then everybody was happy. But that caught me my little beef in Arizona. It was a little 2-year stunt there. One of the employees, I don't even know who, got arrested and then did a controlled buy. When I come back out of prison, I didn't have a job or anything, and I was sort of kind of picked up with what I was doing. Went back to my connection, got a big sack of dope, started selling that just to be able to eat. Well, I got arrested again, and that time they gave me 7 flat.
7 straight years in a state prison in a place that's not known for its cool breezes. What's that like?
Well, there I went to Yuma, Arizona, to a medium, and I worked in the kitchen there too. They had a big riot. The Mexicans and blacks got into a big riot, so they came in and shipped a whole bunch of people out, pile of 200 or so. And they shipped me to Globe, Arizona, to a camp up there. And I went there and almost immediately got a job over at the fairgrounds.
Earning how much per hour?
40 cents.
Did you manage to save while you were in prison?
Not a thing.
How does it feel when you're out in society wearing orange, doing tasks like that?
Even the fairgrounds crew had to wear the safety orange.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that big of a deal at that time.
All right. You didn't feel judged by society or anything like that?
No, not really. I didn't catch that till I got out of there and went back home. Then I started feeling all kinds of anxiety over, are they looking at me now, or all that sort of thing. So that's when I left Arizona and came back to Wyoming. That was 2003 is when I got out.
Once you hit Thane, Wyoming, what did you do there?
Oh, I went to work with my brother doing construction and building log homes. I don't know, about 3 years.
Did you foresee trouble? Did trouble find you?
Well, I didn't really foresee it. It kind of snuck up on me because through the winter, because I was only making $200 a week, I got connected with a guy that gave me a travel trailer, and I moved in behind his house, and he was selling drugs. He wasn't taking care of business, so I wound up selling way more than him, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger, and finally the DCI busted me on this one, and because I was getting my drugs over in Utah, the feds picked it up.
Corkey, is it possible to be a drug dealer in this day and age and not get busted?
No, it's not possible at all. No matter what happens, as soon as somebody around you disappears for a couple of days and you just don't see them, you're done. And it's totally a matter of not, if you're going to get busted, it's all about when. Always. It's just the only way. You're going to get busted. End of story. So, you might have a good year at it. When they searched my house on this thing, tore it apart and all that, there was no drugs, no paraphernalia. The only thing they took from my house was my phone. All the incriminating evidence.
This 12-year stretch, describe that.
Oh, goodness. Lompoc is a complex. There's a medium, a low, and a camp. So I went to the low. I couldn't get into the kitchen there because it was all run by the blacks. So I went to work for Unicorn, which is the prison industries. So I was there at the sign factory for almost 2 years. And then when I got down to Camp Points, they shipped me over to camp. Went to work in the boiler room there. And I had that job for, about 6 years.
Did you have the desire to get high, or were you getting high while you were in prison?
No, none of that. In fact, I never had any kind of withdrawals, even from tobacco or fresh coffee, none of that. It never seemed to affect me. I don't know why.
You were clean and sober.
Yeah, I was spending my money on things to cook. At the boiler house, I had a access to all kinds of equipment and refrigeration and gas burning stoves and all that stuff. So I started making cinnamon rolls and cakes and all sorts of shit in the basement of the car house and selling it on the yard. That's what I spent my money on, was buying stolen stuff from the kitchen.
They say that the average inmate leaves prison with less than $300 on his books. What was your case when you left?
I had about 900 on my books when I left this time.
As we all know, 900 doesn't last long in today's world.
Well, again, I got lucky and landed at my brother's place, so it's been a pretty good step up, getting by until I could get my Social Security engaged.
If you could advise young Corkey or young people who are looking at doing time in prison today, what advice would you give them while they're in prison?
While they're in prison, well, the way to stay clean there is to do your time. What helped me out was thinking about what I had coming up. I was going to be able to take a shower with no shoes on. I was going to have my bathrobe. I was going to be able to have bacon. Those are the things that kept me motivated to not get my head above water like that. You can't think about what you lost or how much time you've done, or because you have no control over any of that. None. Some guys, they're married or they have girlfriends and all that, and they're doing time, and that's going to go away because other people have other things to do, and you can't have a relationship over the phone. Some people manage it, but not many.
Now, a lot of people don't have the good fortune of having a brother and a place to land. If you hadn't had that, what do you think would have been a reasonable amount of money for you to leave prison with, and would you have had the discipline to save it?
I got a little bit lucky because I went to a halfway house, and that was a good step up. I've seen a lot of guys there that took truck driving classes, and there's a lot of opportunities there. They have a chance to have a bed and food, and you can get a vehicle, and you can go find a job. You have vans and buses that take you everywhere. So that's a good come up. That's a good come up, the halfway house is. It's no fun. It's not much better than being in prison because it's completely monitored too. But the halfway houses are a good gig.
I hear you saying be grateful for what you have.
You can't mourn your losses, that's for sure.
You were out twice, and each time you got tested and they found alcohol in your system. Why?
I don't know exactly. I guess I was trying to give myself a bit of a reward for doing well, and that's not applicable. You got to find a different way than drugs or alcohol to give yourself a reward.
Are you an addict?
I don't think so. I haven't had a drop since I got out this time. I have to say that I was probably predispositioned for alcoholism because my parents were, I'm sure. They died young, alcohol-related heart disease.
I kind of painted a picture of a rosy upbringing for you. Was it rosy?
Well, it seemed like it, Cliff. I don't really have anything to compare to that, to tell you the truth. I wasn't abused, I don't think. I don't know the answer to that.
It seems like the big moment for you where things kind of went south. I mean, 27 years of your life spent in prison is darn near a third.
Yeah.
It seems like the big catalyst for that started when you got divorced.
It was. That floored me.
So what would you advise someone in your position back then to either avoid the divorce or not fall so hard after the divorce? How would you counsel someone knowing what you know now?
Well, Cliff, I think everybody is different. For me, that it was such a shock to me that that's how I managed it. I could have survived it better had I thought about it differently. Had already determined that I wasn't doing the right thing anyhow. I wasn't spending enough time with my family. I wasn't home enough. I was too concerned with making ends meet, so to speak, being the best neighbor on the block kind of thing, making all that money. And that's just not the important part of a marriage or a family. And it took all that for me to realize that. And that's what I would school somebody with the divorce and, family affairs and all that was they have to come first before the monetary supplies. If you can't afford something, just don't get it. Give it a minute. It'll come to you. So I think that would be my thing to tell the youngsters is, don't try and do everything at once.
What's your relationship like with your ex and your kids today?
I haven't talked to my ex since we got divorced. She got a restraining order against me because she got child support, so it kind of came with the child support. And my kids, I was alienated from them, and I'm still trying to rebuild that. That's a hard thing, too. They're already done with me. So here I am telling myself what they think, and that's not right either, Cliff.
How old are they now, your kids?
My oldest is 42, and my youngest is 38.
And if you had a chance to say something to them, what would you say?
That's not a simple answer. I'd have to let them talk before I could even talk. It's all up to them. I'm just along for the ride now.
There are 3 parts to the Stay Free Forever podcast. And the second part has me quote from a course that someone else has taken and share what someone else wrote in their workbook or online course and get your opinion on it. You ready to go for that?
Sure.
This passage comes from a really thoughtful young man who is 18 years old. He's a Native American on the Wind River Indian Reservation. It's a substance abuse workbook. He took his workbook so seriously, it was packed full of extra pages that he wrote some of his answers on. He said this: I look back on my childhood as my parents and grandparents were really pushing me to be good in school, which I thought was all right because it felt rewarding to myself that I'm doing good. The only obstacle that I have to overcome is staying away from the influences of drugs and alcohol, which really took a toll on me with the law. I know right from wrong and the negative and positives that come with it. And I find out that knowing my emotions come back very slowly, which makes me feel better instead of using the drugs and alcohol to numb these emotions.
One of the things we did in RDAP was learn to name our emotions and feelings. And he pretty much hit it right on the head there. Doesn't matter what you call it, whether you call it feeling bad or not feeling right or spidey sense or whatever the case may be, but you have to know what's next. When you get that emotion, are you going to hang on to it and sort of feed off of it? Or is it time to let it go and not do that? Pick up on something else. Because not all emotions are bad, So he said all the right things. Naming your emotions is a good thing. I had to learn to do that too. Through grief and trauma, my divorce was so traumatizing. Once I figured out in RDAP that it wasn't all my fault, it takes 2 in marriage and in divorce. So, yeah, that's what got me by it too, is being able to name my emotions.
The third part of the Stay Free Forever podcast has each of us share a quote or a passage that means something to us and talk about it. Who would you like to go first?
I'll go first.
All right.
The one that kind of stuck with me is from an old Grateful Dead song. This goes, I've been down so very damn long, it feels like up to me. I lived that for quite a while, it seemed like. Any more down is somewhere else. I'm up, and, there's plenty of up still to go, so, yeah.
On a side note, I had the opportunity to meet and interview Jerry Garcia from the Grateful Dead. I think he'd be honored by you remembering that. The passage I've chosen, I've not chosen from this book before. I guess I was a little nervous, but it comes from the Bible, Matthew chapter 25, verses 37 through 40. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? The king will reply, I tell you the truth. Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me. How did visits go for you in prison?
Well, I never really had visits. I don't know why. My dad came to visit me one time when I was in Arizona. I kind of did on my visiting over the phone, what little of it I did. I tended to do everything I could to help other people that I was doing time with. Help out my cellie or my workmates or work in the kitchen. And the thing about doing that stuff is it doesn't seem like you're helping, but it doesn't seem like work to do it either. So I like helping people. I like doing things for people. The neighbors, my family. I maybe don't tend to myself enough. You know, I haven't been fishing in a while or any of that kind of stuff. Did I get off subject there a minute?
No, that's a great answer. It's the cheapest, fastest, not necessarily cure-all, but cure for depression is to go do something nice for someone else.
The thing about doing that is you can do it without even thinking. You don't even know you're helping somebody else. And all of a sudden, they're grateful, and you're going, wow, that was cool.
That's great. Corkey, is there anything that we haven't talked about or anything we missed that you'd like to address?
One thing that got me in trouble, like you said, I went back to prison. I had a couple of opportunities. One of the things that got me in trouble was telling my parole officer that I didn't like prison, but I'm not afraid of it. And I don't think that was a good thing to say, because you should be afraid of it. It is bad. I mean, it isn't like on TV in most places anyway. There are some pretty rough facilities out there for sure. But I think once you do a bunch of time, you sort of lose track of that it's not cool to go to prison.
You told me and the group that your main job now is to toe the line so you don't go back to prison. And why is that?
Well, I don't have another stint in me. If I catch another beef, I'll die in prison, Cliff. I'm done. You know, I'd rather have a marked grave than an unmarked one. Unbeknownst to me, I have people that like me. So that's a good start right there.
Well, I can prove that because I like you, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
The Stay Free Forever podcast is recorded and produced by Clifford Fuel, owner of Stay Free Forever, LLC, a Colorado and Wyoming company. Stay Free Forever provides adult and youth life skills courses via both e-learning and mailed workbooks, plus Zoom classes for any age group. Our theme music was composed and performed by James Benjamin Fuel. Editing and technical assistance are provided by Mary Tulin. My name is Molly Moore. For more information, go to stayfreeforever.com or email clifford@stayfreeforever.com.